Christine Jewell,
The Queen is here.
welcome to the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. We finally got you on here.
Finally
got you on. Okay, you get the same opening question as everybody.
All right.
What does it mean for you to be intentional?
What does it mean for me to be intentional? To me, what it means to be intentional is to consciously slow down so that you can speed up and walk in alignment, walk in integrity. Create a life by design.
Consciously slow down to speed up.
Consciously slow down so that you can speed up, walk in integrity, and create a life by design.
I'm guessing this is going to be a bit of a mind warp for most of my listeners. So
I think so much of the time, we're just thinking in motion. We're running from one thing to the next. And one of the most challenging things for people is to slow down and actually ask themselves, what do I want to consciously create here instead of unconsciously just recreate, right? Mm-hmm. So many of the problems that I see happening are people just recreating and rehashing a lot of the same things day in and day out because they refuse to slow down. We refuse to slow down. We have a pace that we operate at, and so we just keep creating more of what's familiar to that pace. So when we slow down with the awareness, that's what I mean by consciously, right? We're slowing down to create greater awareness and ask ourselves, hold on a second, what do I actually want to create here? What do I actually want to build? Is it in integrity with the life I want? And am I designing a life, or am I just being a victim to repetition and rehashing the past, right? External circumstances.
Wow. Okay, so...
Is that still a mind warp?
There's going to be a lot to unpack. Let's give people just a little bit of background on who you are and what you do. And they will have figured out by now, of course, you're my wife.
I am the queen.
The queen of Gravitas,
Yes.
The queen of Gravitas Enterprises, the Momentum Company, all the things that we do. Talk to us a little bit about your background, what brought you here, and the give us a little bit of a preview into the book, if you would.
Well, of course, I'm your love. First and foremost, my name is Christine Jewell. I am a warrior at heart. I think that when I speak to people, if you're a warrior, you just know that you are one. And I am one. I've been a warrior since day one, fighting battles, facing challenges. I loved great obstacles as a child. I loved to lead. I was always, wanting to be large and in charge out in front and throw a good challenge at me and I'll overcome it. And that's really, obviously a product of our upbringing and our past as well, We moved around a lot. Actually, we're recording this podcast from Italy. We're sitting in Tuscany right now. And this is the place of my homeland, right? So I grew up here in my early formative years. We grew up in Europe, Italy, traveled a lot. Dad worked for the U.S. government. So there was a lot of constant change, a lot of chaos sometimes, right? And just having to really adjust, adapt to new environments, new cultures, new people, always be reinventing yourself, always a new challenge, always a new thing to overcome. And so while it was very exciting and it created a lot of insatiable appetite for desire or adventure, it also created a bit of an addiction to chaos, right? And always needing to have things changing all the time. And so I won't tell you the whole story, but that program is beautiful on one side of the coin because you can have a very high risk tolerance. You love adventure, you love challenges, but you also create a lot of messes, relationally, in business, financially, with your body, all of it. And so I walked through decades of kind of living these two worlds, right? Lots of adventure, lots of excitement, lots of passion, lots of chaos, lots of drama, lots of problems to always fix. And so I hit a breaking point years ago where I was like, there's got to be a different way to build businesses and build a marriage and build a life where I can still have adventure and I can still pursue things that really excite me, and I don't have to always be burning everything down in my path. And so this is a very long, a very short-winded way of saying that's where Drop the Armor was born. This book, this journey was really my journey of refining that old program and stepping into a life of greater alignment, where I could be doing the work that lights me up, be having the marriage that we have today, the family that we have, and do it from a totally different place.
Beautiful. You know what's coming through it, I think that most people wouldn't get to know naturally, maybe about you, is the level of depth that comes with you in a conversation with you. And people are going to get a taste of it today, right? They're going to get a taste of it through this podcast, or if they watch the video on YouTube, or they watch some of the short clips that we post. How did this past of yours play the sense of adventure, the variety, the way that you grew up, the some of the things that happened to you along the way? How did that all play into the depth that now comes with Christine?
Yes, I'm a very deep person. I like to go deep and wide with everything. Our relationships.
I want people to know, we don't have normal conversations.
We don't have normal conversations.
We don't sit around generally, and we're not talking about
the news or the
football game or people or things like this. I mean, it's always something going deep into a piece of scripture or dreams that Christine's having or that we're having, or there's never what I would call a normal conversation per society's standards. There's a level of depth that Christine brings to the table. You do get access to that through this book, which I think is fantastic. It's changing people's lives. But where does that depth come from?
I love this question. I like to go deep and wide. I don't like to play at the surface level. I find it boring. And again, this really goes back to the first question that you asked about intentionality, is that when we always rush and we're always playing at the surface level, we really miss out on the richness and the depth of life and the experience of every moment. And I think so many people we're skimming our lives. We're just rushing. We're always rushing to the next thing. We're missing out. We're missing out on moments with our family. We're missing out on moments of romance with our spouse that we're never going to get back, conversations to get to know each other. We're missing out on really the joy of the work that we're doing right now, intimacy with God. And I wanted to say that because it is so perfect that we're recording this and you asked me that question in Italy, in Tuscany. We're sitting at a country farmhouse. I wish you guys could see the background, but we're surrounded by fields and cypress trees, and we saw some we've seen
wheat
wildlife. We've seen wheat harvest.
We've seen full swing.
Yeah,
There's
we see
alfalfa
vineyards,
fields and vineyards.
Awesome.
Yeah,
and we've been here for 2 weeks. And like I said, I grew up here, and so this is really the thing, is the insatiable appetite for life that I believe comes from experiencing a place that is rich already in history, in culture, in relationships. Like just being here. If you guys have been to Italy or probably other foreign countries, people slow down, they eat longer, they slow down, they spend more time talking to each other, I think. And so I want to say that I grew up with that program of a depth and a richness of life anyways. We weren't rushing around as kids. It wasn't always like, get ready, you got to go to this practice and then that practice. And then, we weren't driving a half hour here, a half hour there. We were sitting at home. We got out of school to go have lunch with our family. We had afternoon naps. We had a beautiful, on one hand, and I talk about this in the book, it's like this contrast of this beautiful life and then also living with an addict. My father was an alcoholic. So it was like on one hand, really beautiful, really rich. On the other side, there was a whole other world that was really dark. But on this side, there was a lot of beauty around me all the time, in the landscape, the physical landscape of the place that we lived, in the pace of life that we had, in the conversations. Like there was so much richness. And so I talk about that in the book, but one of the core programs that I had was Life is an Adventure, and it's meant to be fully experienced. Like that is truly a core program. Now, I had another program that came from living with my dad's alcoholism and addiction and, all of the stuff that came with that. But that's really where it was. And so always wanting to discover, what is the next thing? What's the next mystery? What's under the next layer,
Yeah.
And I just think part of it is also one of the gifts. I know. That's also one of the gifts God gave me, is the ability to see beyond what meets the eye. So I never take anything at face value. I'm always like, no. Let's get in there and let's taste it more. Let's go deeper.
Got it.
So
I definitely pick up the, your upbringing, where you grew up, how you grew up. Like that definitely plays into really a higher standard right? One of the things we talk about in the Thriving Leader is standards and stewardship, right? And just so you just have a higher standard for what good living looks like, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Lifestyle.
So, yeah, a higher, and you've definitely challenged me, right? Growing up quite different, right? On a leech farm in central Minnesota, in a very different, also in many ways very rich in its own way, right?
Yeah.
Just a different standard, a different level of expectation for what like really amazing gets to look like. So
How cool is that though? Like, talk about two totally different worlds
yeah,
colliding, and it works.
right. It does work.
Work.
More about that later, because there's like this interview is busting with things that we could talk about and directions we could take it, and I'm trying to channel
intentional marriage.
I'm trying to intentionally channel a specific direction.
Okay.
You did, so you mentioned the beautiful side of it, but also the dark side of it, and I'm venturing to bet that there's a bunch of people that listen to this podcast or that will hear this show at some point or see this at some point who have dealt with alcoholism, dealt with abuse, dealt with different things like that in their life. So how has that also played into your depth?
Yeah, like I said, I grew up in Italy, so Italian was my mom's native language. English was my father's native language. He was living in a country that was really foreign to him, and from a young age, I'm giving you a little bit of backstory because I think it helps us to really understand too, like where our parents came from and what their origin story was, because their origin story affects our origin story, and our origin story affects our children's, and we keep passing these stories on. But my dad was abandoned really as a child by his physical father. So kind of like a lone wolf, really, from the beginning, raised as an only child. Mom wasn't really there. A lot of abandonment, a lot of, if it's going to be, it's up to me, lone wolfing it. And so it's interesting that throughout his whole life, he was always feeling like a foreigner. I don't really belong here, right? And trying so hard to strive to fit in, to belong, going into the Navy, being in the CIA, perfect, job for someone to get recruited. That is a lone wolf. But I witnessed as a little girl sort of this hero of mine, because guys, if you're listening, you are your daughter's hero. Like, you are her first love. And my dad, I talk about that in the book, he was really my first love. And I was so desiring to be close to this man who was so full of life and so charismatic, like top sales, like making great money. We were traveling the world, like we had this beautiful lifestyle, but he was like unreachable. He was unreachable. Like I couldn't really get through to him very much. And so I was always craving like his attention, his affection, his love. And so I knew that if I performed, then I would get attention. If I looked pretty, I did the ballet, I did the sports, I did the whatever, that I would get that. But also I also witnessed him really in this internal battle all the time with alcohol, with women, with different things. And I was always trying to figure out, like what's going on? What's going on? Because there's a lot of confusion, and children are very intuitive. They can sense things, they can feel things. And so it was almost like a discovery also of wanting to reach something that I could see, that I could feel, like the intimacy, the connection, the desire to be there, but then like never being able to access it, right? Yeah. And then you're watching this man that you love, that's your hero, one day loves you and is hugging you, and then the next day is stone cold and is very aggressive and physically and verbally abusive, and it creates a lot of confusion. And so I think when you have a lot of confusion around these areas, you start looking to discover, right? You want to do more discovery, to go like, what is it? What's going on?
Yeah. And so has that led you down a path of just that following your curiosity, and is that what makes you so good at getting to the core, when especially now you work, to share it with the audience, you work in a capacity of as an executive coach in a lot of ways, and so you're working with some CEOs, you're working with CFOs, vice presidents, high-level leaders of, in some cases, multi-billion-dollar organizations, and so and you're helping them discover
the core,
the core.
seeds,
a lot of these really deep things.
Yeah, for sure. I think God is always preparing us. He allows us to go through challenges growing up so that we can grow, so that we can help other people, and so that we can change the story going forward. But, really, growing up, it was like nothing really is as it seems, right? I just knew that. I also had a lot of just visions as a child. I think I've shared this with you. I had a lot of external visions and this ability to have insight and revelation into things that I couldn't ever really explain. But I think that having this physical experience with my father heightened that, right? Heightened that sense. It helped cultivate that sense to be able to see beyond what was really going on. And that's why even today as I coach, as we go through things, we really address the surface level because it's never really that, you know. I feel very fortunate now not to have all this cynical anger or resentment and stuff towards my father, because I could see the brokenness and the pain that came from his lineage, his generations, and that he was never able to break free from it. But so much of the behavioral stuff, you know, the affairs, the chasing women, the always needing to get the next sale, always needing to have the next things, and never being satiated, never being able to relax, never being able to be emotionally free, living in a cage. You know, and I see that so many people and so many of us. And, you know, I went through that myself, like put myself in a cage of protection for, you know, a couple of decades, you know, because we always relive the program until we decide to break it. But, yeah, I don't think I ever saw, I think the only time I ever saw my dad really, really emotional was when the dog died, you know, years ago when I was little. And that was the first time I really saw my dad like crack, you know, and I was like, man. You know, anyway.
Wow. All right. So the book is called?
The book is called Drop the Armor, Release the Past, Ignite Your Faith, and Unlock an Extraordinary Life. And it is really a path of just that. You know, I think so many of us are wearing these layers of protective armor, walls that we've built to protect ourselves from either the pain of our past, the mistakes, the shame of what our parents did or didn't do, or what we did or what we didn't do, or what we're still doing, right? Financially, relationally, whatever. We've just got these walls up of protection. Maybe there's been betrayal, looking over your back, having to watch your back 24/7. We hear that all the time. I raise my hand. And so we carry all of this weight, all of this baggage, and it really is like an armor. It's thick, it's clunky, it doesn't allow us to move forward swiftly in our relationships. And so it's, how do you drop that? You know, we hear that stuff all the time, like just let it go. Let it go. How do you do that? You know, how do I let it go? I can't physically drop it. It's like this emotional, you know, shackle around me sometimes. And so whether you think you have it or you don't, I guarantee you do, right? And so it's a journey of really uncovering everything that is keeping us blocked from having momentum, forward momentum, more intimacy, more connection. It's bringing that up to the surface so we can get rid of it, so that we can go into deeper connection and intimacy, and really step into the extraordinary life that God has for us. And I say extraordinary because nothing that God does is ordinary.
Wow. I want to come back to something you mentioned early on about people who are just always rushing. We're always rushing from one thing to the next. We don't take time to slow down, and this causes us to lack a lot of intentionality. One of the big things that comes up with our clients is easily top 3 every single time when we run an event. People are asking for help with time management, right? It comes up when we ask people, hey, what makes this event a worthy investment of your time? You're here for 2 days. What do you want to learn? It's time management and work-life balance. These are the 2 things that people are asking for the most these days, which to me is a symptom probably of something deeper, since that's the theme of the show today.
Do everything different.
Okay, how does
be different, think different, act different.
How does dropping the armor? Well, first of all, before we go there, actually, before that question, how is people always rushing, never having enough time, never being able to stop and take a breath, always having to move on to the next thing? What is that a symptom of?
There's so many layers to this. You know, I could geek out. We could have an entire year talking about time on this podcast.
Of course.
But, okay, there's a couple things. I want to maybe just list a couple things real quick. Number one, every single problem in our life is a relationship problem and an identity problem. I do believe it comes down to that. So at the root, we have a relationship with time problem. Right? We have a dysfunctional relationship with time, which means we may have a distorted perception of time. So there's the clock, the 24-hour clock. You know, I talk about this in the book, that was invented by humans, right? And a lot of us have this addiction to the clock, or we're racing against the clock. And this is how we perceive time. It's something that's very limited. We only have so much of it. And that is one reality. And that is one truth. That's the world that we live in, the physical world. But then there's also the concept of heavenly time. And I'm going really broad on this, but I talk about a lot in the book, these concepts of worldly things versus eternal things, kingdom things, heavenly things, because we're in the world, but we're not called to operate of the world, not to be slaves of the tools that we created. So the clock is a tool that we created to optimize our day, to have meeting times, to set appointments, but we become slaves to it. And we let it become the master of us.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I mean by the distorted relationship. Now, this thing is in charge of me. It's the master. I'm the slave. I'm always rushing, and it's got me on a leash. And so I'm always operating from this panic, this, anxiousness all the time, which anxiety means you're living in fear of the future. Okay. What if it doesn't happen? What if we don't get it done fast enough? What if? Or we feel depressed because we didn't do it. And then we're living in the past. So when we're a slave to the clock, we find ourselves often living in a constant state of anxiety. And I believe that's because we have a distorted relationship with time. So one of the things that I do, talk about in the book, we work with clients on, is redefining and reestablishing your relationship with time, that it is a tool, right? It is a tool. You're the master of the tool. And we adopt a different thinking, a different mindset around time, which extends beyond the surface level, which is the clock. The clock is like surface level, right? I can see it's 3D. I know you've talked about 3D on the show. Okay. But heavenly time, and if you think about it, is called Kairos time. It's about divine moments. It's the right time, the ripe time, the right time for the right thing in the right season. And if you guys are in agriculture, you know that there is timing, there is order, there is structure, there's seasons, there's cycles. And man is always trying to mess with that. We're always trying to rush the timing. We're trying to rush the cycle. We're trying to shortcut this, and we're trying to manipulate it. And we have forgotten the art. And I say forgotten because we're like mentally void of it, of how to understand timing and seasons for things in our life, from things that we're called to produce, relationships that, we get to invest in for a season. Like, we got to get back to being in touch with that sense of timing, that really changes our internal pace. So I wanted to address the time thing, because if you are ruled by the physical clock, you will always be a slave. But if you can be ruled more by heavenly time, and you understand, this is an understanding, you got to slow down for this. You got to slow down and ask yourself, is this the right time? Are we rushing this? Because if you rush things, you usually break things.
Right.
Right? If you force things, you break things.
Well, and I think a lot of people will relate to that from an equipment perspective, right? When you're running the tractor too fast, or driving too fast, or whatever the case may be, often that's when the thing breaks.
Yeah.
Right? That's when mistakes happen at work. That's when accidents happen. Trailers get tipped over, tanks get tipped over, right? I mean, people get hurt. That's when we're rushing.
You have to know, you've got to be so in tune with the machine, the car, the Ferrari, the tractor, the thing, the field, that you know when it's time. When it's time to pull over, to do the pit stop. I did that daily message yesterday talking about the Ferrari on the track. Like, you've got to know how hard, there's a fine line where if you push it too much, now you just broke it. And it's too much in relationship. And so that's when you are always ruled by something external, like a clock or a gadget, you lose touch.
Yep.
Right? You lose that sense of knowing. So sorry, I want to go back to that. Time. So that was one, is what is my relationship with time? Am I a slave to time or the master?
I want to tap on one thing there before we move on to the identity piece, because I just like to frame things up in ways that people can really, truly get it and relate. And the one thing that I know is true for me is I grew up mowing a lot of lawns, especially my mom and dad's lawn. It was a 3-4 hour project with the push mower every time I did it. And as much as I might have resented that at the time, today there's a part of me that just really loves mowing lawn.
Yeah.
Right. And I know a lot of guys, at least, that are in some of our coaching programs who really appreciate that time in the tractor.
Tractor time.
Tractor time, right? A lot of our guys talk about it. They appreciate that time, like being in the equipment, or anytime I get in a skid steer, you know, like it's a rare circumstance for me these days, but anytime I get in there, it just feels, it's the hum of the machine, the vibration of the equipment, the work, you know, you're seeing physical production of work while you're doing something. When you're in there, it's almost as if time stands still. Right? Like you're not checking your clock every 15 minutes to see if you got another call or you got another alert, or in my personal opinion is Apple Watches should be banned. You should just, not that they should be banned.
Take that thing off
just
your wrist.
throw it out the damn truck window and get rid of it. It's just such a distraction that's keeping you sucked in and no longer living in the present. But when we're in those situations, we've all had a moment where it seemed like time stood still, right? And we've all had moments where it's just like, man, I got to the end of the day and what did I do, right? Or what really happened? Nothing really got done today. I didn't even get to taste it, you know? It's like our golden retriever sucking down her dinner. Like, did you enjoy it? Like, did you? Yeah. So I always like to, when we're talking about time, I want people to think about what you mentioned, chronological, okay? There's a sequence, right? There's 10 and there's 10:15 and 10:30 and 10:45. There's chronological time, but then there's Kairos time, which is the depth of the moment in
Heavenly
each one
time.
of those. And I mean, it could be a second, 30 seconds, a minute, but what it really doesn't matter, because the physical chronological measurement doesn't matter when you have heavenly time.
Yeah, and I want to say this because you talked about being in the tractor time. It's funny because that's almost like you finally give yourself permission to slow down, to think, to allow thoughts to come to you, maybe to be inspired in that flow state. What you explained of time being suspended, I mean, that's in neuroscience, we call that flow state, right? So, I'm in flow state. Every athlete has felt it. Every, farmer has felt it, probably, like everybody. That's when you're in a craft and you're doing the thing that you know that you're called to do, and you know you're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, and it feels effortless. That's flow state. That is you dropping into those Kairos moments where you're working with time, and time is working with you, and the elements are working with you, right? And we can fall into this in conversation. Sometimes you've been in a conversation with someone, it's like, man, it's just like there's flow here. Like, this is effortless. Flow state is effortless execution that requires no conscious resources. Let me say that again. Flow state is effortless execution. That means you are not, having to pull a bunch of conscious resources, thinking about what you're doing, thinking about every move. It's just automatic. It's in your nervous system, but it's beyond just in your nervous system. It's you and everything around you working. I was a big mountain biker before. I love downhill skiing. Like, I come from a background of sports, and it's like when you're one with the bike, you're one with the mountain, you're one with the tractor, you're one with whatever you're doing, that timelessness. And here's the thing, you can't plan that. You can schedule tractor time, but what happens in that time, that flow state, that's a natural, that's a supernatural synchronicity that starts to happen. Do you know what I'm saying? And so that's my suggestion is, what if I entertain the idea that I could experience more flow in every single day, in every sales conversation, driving time? Like, that means you got to drop in, right? To spend less time all up in your head and up in everybody's business and stressing out, looking at the clock and what's next, and really just tuning in, slowing down. And the art of timing and time is being able to discern the right thing at the right time. Divine, like these moments, we've all had them. We're like, man, I didn't plan that. How we met, yesterday was a whole day of that. It was like, wow. It's just like things just locking into place. And I know it sounds maybe like hairy-fairy, but every single one of you listening has had moments like that, if you can think back. Like, when something unexpected, unplanned, boom, that thing came through. There's no way I could have planned that. Like, think about what you were doing in that moment. What were you focused on? Where was your head? It wasn't in my head. Oh, okay, right? Like, there's things that there's exercises we can do to kind of help people backpedal and figure out, how do I spend more time in this state, which is this state, versus the state of anxiousness and pressure, racing against the clock. Which brings me into the next thing, and I'm going to talk about identity in a second, is the idea of balancing time. first of all, the idea of balance is ridiculous. There's no such thing, because the minute you think of something, you've got two scales. The minute you put something over here, this side automatically goes up, right? It's just like, and you're trying to figure out like what's just the right amount. And so I'm sure other people have said this on your podcast, I don't know, but for me, it's like throwing out this idea of needing to balance anything and operating from oneness, meaning integrity. Okay, let's just use this. Integrity isn't just doing what's right or being morally good and stuff, but the word integrity comes from the word integrale, which means whole. It's whole. And so a lot of us are living fragmented lives. Like, man, I'm over here doing this thing, but I feel empty in my relationship. I'm over here doing this, but like my fitness is sucking right now. And I just feel like I'm kicking butt and taking names in this area. And this is the expense of everything else. And then we try to shift and throw some balance over here. And okay, I'll spend time with the kids. And then this starts falling down. It's because we're always doing this.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of going, okay, I'm making a decision to build a life by design where I feel complete, right? Where I can feel complete. There's a sense of wholeness. And obviously there's a lot of exercises that we walk clients through in the process, but part of it is, again, a lot of what we're talking about is the psychology of eliminating these ideas that like balance is a thing.
Okay.
And I apologize if you've had other people on the show that say, "Oh, balance." I'm like, that's BS.
Yeah. No, you're
bullshit on
you're
it.
aligned with most people
Okay,
in that we would agree, generally speaking, that that balance is BS. There's no such thing as work-life balance, at least since we integrated 20 years ago, 25 years ago, these cell phones into every aspect of life. I mean, there used to be a time and a place where you could sort of shut it down and go home at the end of the day and at least have the illusion of some semblance of balance. But what you're talking about is deeper than that.
Yeah, what I'm talking about is everywhere I am, all of me is there. And everywhere I am, I'm living in alignment to the values that I hold at the highest level. And so we feel out of balance, out of order, fragmented, torn, whatever the favorite words are, when we are compromising our values to get an immediate need met. I need to get that sale. I need to get that sale. Okay, I'll compromise what I believe. I'll take on this deal. I'll take on this client, even though I know it's not the right thing. I'll say yes to this, and I'll put my family aside, even though I know, deep inside, like my gut is in knots about this. This is like a no, I'm doing this. So whenever we compromise our values to try to get something, usually that's rooted in lack and fear. So that goes back to identity, right? If we're still operating from an identity that I don't have enough, I always have to be proving myself, I always have to, then we will compromise our values all day long. And certainly this was something that I went through in my own life. That's why I wrote an entire book about it, something you and I talk about a lot. And one of the first orders of business when we work with clients is really saying, like, what are first of all, do you even know what your values are? Because a lot of people will say yes. And look, even at Thriving Leader, when we do this exercise and we ask people what matters most, people always put the same three things down. Let's be honest. They put God, family, and health or something like that, right?
But not always in that order.
Not always in that order. But when you look at
Customers.
them, you're like, is health really one of your priorities? And when was the last time you hung out with your wife? And how's your spiritual life? And the reality is, they say that those are the values, but their life is not a reflection of it.
Yeah.
And so oneness means my life reflects. When you look at me, you see God, family, fitness, whatever, right? Like you see what I say I'm about.
Yeah. Wow.
Are you a walking, talking contradiction of your values? Or are you a walking, talking reflection of your values? And if you want respect and honor, you need to be a walking, talking reflection, not a contradiction.
Okay. That was the mic drop moment right there. If you guys didn't pick that up, this is the spot where you rewind 30 seconds.
If you're wondering why your wife doesn't respect you or your people don't respect you, ask yourself that question.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because you get to work with people at the highest end of organizations. And so when people are operating out of integrity with the values that they say that they uphold, but don't necessarily act out or they're not living them out in integrity in their day-to-day life, how does that then show up in their organization?
Okay, so when someone's a walking, talking contradiction, well, what we see a lot of is division. You know, the Bible tells us, the Word of God tells us, do not have a divided mind. A house that is divided falls, right? And often what we see is dissension among the troops, right? Divided leadership, people pushing different agendas, different visions, different values. People are confused. They don't know, well, wait a second, who's in charge here? Like, who has authority, right? And so, again, I believe God is a God of order. He's a God of authority. He's a God of vision and direction. And where there is no vision, the people perish. So again, we might say, I value growth and contribution and success or whatever it is, but I'm not casting a compelling vision to my wife. I value being a great leader. Okay, how are you leading in your marriage? They don't. They sit around often and wait for their wife to say, hey, this is, like waiting for her to make decisions, waiting for whatever, letting your 8-year-old run the household. And then often what we see is at work, it's kind of the same thing. The children are running the roost, right? And other people have more influence over your teams than you do, and you've lost respect, you've lost authority. And you go, why? What's going on? I would challenge you to say, how are you doing in casting a compelling vision? Do the people know who you are? Do they know what you stand for? Do they know where you're taking them? Or do they just see you, following your own agenda and kind of leaving them to the wolves, and right? Are you just afraid to speak up? Are you afraid to have challenging conversations, to call people up? I really believe in calling people up, not necessarily calling them out. Like, we want to address behavior, but call people up. So I think there's a lot of that. Is this fear of actually leading where you're leading from a place of authority without ego. Ooh, right? Like without a bunch of ego. And so we just see this. And I just want to say that when there's a lot of fighting, same problem every day in your marriage, same problems inside your house, same problems in your teams, we see this a lot in leadership. There's so much ego. There's so much ego in the room, and everybody's striving for significance. Everybody's striving to feel validated, striving to feel important. And I think that falls back on the leadership. For us, it's like, how are we doing?
Where do you see the need to meet the expectations of others getting in the way of people being able to live this level of integrity that you're talking about, right? Because I want to rewind just a minute, right? And what we're talking about here is what is someone's identity? In other words, like, how are they showing up? Who are they showing up as? Who are they really, right? And that identity, who they believe they are in at the deepest levels, permeates through everything else.
Yeah, and
right?
so you guys.
And I know, for myself, this has been one of those big lifetime challenges, and I know a lot of other people deal with this too. It's being really worried about what other people think. And this impacts how I use my time. This impacts how I show up, whether I take the client or don't take the client, right? Or whether I decide to do this or not. It's often because I'm worried. I don't want to let someone down. I'm worried about what they'll think. Worried about what the customer will think. What if they won't call me back if I don't do this? Maybe the employee will quit if we don't do this, right? And that gets in the way a lot too. So can you speak to that a little bit from an identity, getting this aligned identity that's in integrity with itself, and how that can help me solve for this?
I mean, I'm just going to tell everybody to read chapter 4 in here. It's called Shifting Your Allegiance, because
it's my favorite chapter.
It just says it all. In fact, I'm just going to start right there. I'm just going to read the first thing. Chapter 4. And by the way, this is fueled by, obviously, Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to mammon. Mammon is a spirit of greed, of fear, right? People, that has been translated to money, but it's oftentimes the things that we fear is because we think we're going to lose a sale, lose an opportunity, lose a relationship. And it's that spirit of fear, a spirit of greed, a spirit that is not of God. So it's like, whom will you serve? Choose this day who you will serve, because who you serve owns you. Who you serve owns you. Ask yourself this question: who and what runs your life? When we worship the things of the world, we become puppets of the world. By the way, when we are afraid of things and we are like puppets on puppet strings, that's worship. That's idolatry in a way, right? We're putting these things on pedestals. We become slaves to the things that we have built or created, and they literally consume us and take over our lives. Slaves to our businesses, schedules, other people's opinions. Where once there was joy and excitement, we find ourselves operating from pressure and underlying fear. We pretend we are in charge, but when we dig deep and get honest with ourselves, it's plain to see who and what is holding the reins, and it isn't us. What we think we're in control of is actually controlling us. So there's so much richness and depth right there. Like if you just read that over and over again, and the question is really, do I want to be a leader or do I want to be a puppet? That's the identity. Because every single leader I work with, one of the first orders of business after, of course, like getting clear on your values and choose this day, like what kind of life do you want? Is if you decide and you raise your hand and you say, yep, I know I'm called to be a leader. Like it's in my bones. Like it's in my bone marrow, it's in my blood. I'm a leader. Then part of that identity is being fully okay with being unpopular. Your job is not to win the popularity contest. Your job is to lead. And they're two very different things. Because the person that is going for the popularity contest or the approval of man will never be able to lead men. And at the end of the day, people don't respect people who are always bending and twisting to please them. And I'm going to say this as a wife too. Women, seek strong, grounded leadership from the man in their life. And if they know they can manipulate and twist you and bend you, then they have the power over you. And now they have the power and the strength and the structure of the relationship, which is actually an inversion of what God created it. So now you have a totally inverted dynamic, which will suck the life right out of your marriage. But it happens in business too, right? There's a lack of power in the right way, not like abusive power, but there's a lack of authority because we're afraid. So we just outsource authority. We outsource power to everyone else because we're actually afraid of it. And maybe it's because you don't trust yourself. Because what if I get it and I don't? I'll screw it up. What if I get it and I'll do something messed up with it, right? Maybe I don't know what to do with it. There's so much there. But I just want to say that, I often say this in my podcast that people pleasing is number one. It is idolatry. It's in a way. It's giving away the authority that's been given to you by God. If he gave you a business to lead, people to lead, he's going to test you. He's going to see how do you do under pressure when you're persecuted, when your ideas are attacked. Like, can you stand in the fire? And so I always ask my clients, like, are you ready to be disliked? Get comfortable, with that. And it doesn't mean, and you'll be highly loved and praised as well. But you can't let that be the thing. You're there to please the Lord.
Well, and I think people often say that what I hear is it's better to be respected than liked.
Yeah, and they're not the same thing.
Which I agree with. I mean, we get that at the core, but that's surface level, right? What you're talking about here is from an identity perspective is like you're just saying like you get to be okay.
Well, the respect is a byproduct of you operating and knowing who you are and being unwavering. You're being steadfast. Somebody knows, okay, if this guy's under attack or we're not going to be able to push him over, coerce him, manipulate him. People pleasing and what happens around it is the greatest form of manipulation. And those who are easily offended are easily manipulated. So if you're worried about what everybody else is thinking about you and that's what's keeping you up at night, that means you're easy to manipulate. And we all are at some level, in a sense. That's our flesh. That's the nature of our humanity, is that we have to belong because it's part of the tribe. If you're not part of the tribe, you die, right? So again, our limbic brain, right, is the part that's like, we're tribal, we need to stick together so we can live. God gave that to us for a reason, but again, we're very worldly in it instead of recognizing, okay, hold on a second. I'm part of a bigger kingdom here. I serve a bigger God. I have a bigger assignment on my life, and at the end of the day, the right people will be in alignment with me. So we set right partnership, right marriage, right business alliances, and we operate by a different set of rules.
Is that?
I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Is that where your peace comes from now?
Yeah, it's like, as for me and my house, this is the Joshua moment, right? Like, this is Joshua. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. We're not going to serve man. We're going to love man. We're going to provide. The king is there for his people. Yes, we're going to serve the people, but there's a kingdom order. First comes God. And when God tells us to do something, we love each other, but I also am like, okay, I love you. I'm going to respect you. But if you tell me something that doesn't sit well, I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to say, okay, Lord, like what, there's still a hierarchy and an order to things. And I think God is seeking men and women who will lead with the right heart. One of the prayers is pray for the heart of David. Pray for the heart of David, the wisdom of Solomon. Because David was a man after God's own heart, and he screwed up. I mean, gosh, he did some awful things. If you listen to him, he did some dumb things. It doesn't mean that we're without mistakes, and God is gracious, but he was a man after God's heart above all. And I think that that's the key: is, do I want to really love the Lord and serve the Lord, and will I answer to him first and foremost? And am I willing to walk away? From things that are out of integrity, out of alignment. And again, that's that wholeness. That's that one sense of peace, because you're walking in integrity. So you can have spiritual peace and be physically uncomfortable.
Is that, do you believe that's the solution for many leaders, people that may be listening to this right now? Truly, is it shifting the allegiance?
I think it's everything. I think in order to be a great leader, you need to know how to be a great follower and a great student. And who is the master of you? Because if you're going to be, to whom much is entrusted, much is required, but who is leading you? Where do you go? Because the higher up you go, the greater the demands, the greater the pressures, the more responsibility. The weight of leadership is heavy. So who do you turn to? And what I've seen is when people don't have that intimacy, I'm talking about intimacy with their spiritual father, not just a distant thing, but like this, like we're talking like dad, and also intimacy with the partner, the one who created everything, who knows every resources that your business needs, that you can sit down and do business with. When you don't have that, who do you go to? What I've seen, unfortunately, is a lot of poor counsel, people reaching to misaligned partnerships or taking advice, paying for advice from people that don't share the same values with them, don't have the same level of discernment, don't have those eyes to see, and or relief. They go try to get relief. The pressure's too big, the responsibility is too high. So I'm gonna go drink. I'm gonna maybe have an affair. I'm gonna just check out and watch football all day. I'm gonna, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But it's like, are you seeking relief? Because again, that's human. Like, we need relief sometimes. But where do you go?
Yeah.
For the relief, to let the pressure off, to really be human, to be vulnerable, and to be fed again.
Is that kind of a litmus test then? Would you give that to someone as a litmus test? What I mean by like that, really, like a litmus test shows where the pH, right, and like where it is on the scale. So what, if someone is consistently going to alcohol, drugs, sex,
You're trying to escape from something,
seeping into ESPN for hours and hours at night, or the news, right? CNN or Fox or whatever, just seeping. If they're leveraging that consistently as the escape to shut down the work mind, is that somebody who's probably misaligned?
Always. Yeah. Whenever we run, we escape from things, and we hear this language like, I just need to get away. I need to go take a vacation so I can just escape my, like, it's almost like we're always either running away from something or we're running to something. That's why it's not, when we address the behavior, we miss the mark. I believe if, people are struggling with alcohol and we talk about just drinking, don't drink, don't do this, don't watch pornography, don't do this, don't, and we're addressing the behavior, it's like we're missing the mark. Because when you address behavior, you'll always have to regulate people by law. Like, you're have to going to police people. So you've got to get to the heart of the matter. You've got to get to the roots to go, what is driving the behavior? And so when people are going to alcohol, whatever it is, the thing that soothes you, what's your pacifier? And where do you go for relief? And where do you go for strength and significance and worth? Just look, you're either running to something or you're running away from something. We could start to backtrack and go, okay, I'm running to that for what, right? for relief, for significance, for affection. I mean, again, a lot of affairs, it's not about a sexual thing. Sometimes it is a lust thing, but sometimes it's like people just want to feel a sense of connection and of love. They want affection so badly, right? And they're going to all the wrong places to get it. Sometimes they need adventure. So they're after the thrill because their life has become so boring that everything is just routine, that you're created for the great unknown. So this is where they get risk and like adventure. So it's really getting to the root of what are the things that are driving you to these places. Because you got to stop addressing the behavior. This is also why I don't agree with like, that, I know this is controversial, but when people say, oh, I'm still an alcoholic after breaking free from alcohol for years, they're still identifying as an alcoholic, and which is, again, an identity thing. It's like you're free from that, right? When you're free from that, you don't choose the thing. God changes the desires of your heart. The desires of your heart change. Anyways, that was a little side note. But I just wanted to say that if we want to lead, I believe God will test us to say, okay, I'm gonna apply some pressure. I'm going to allow you to experience some pressure. I want to see how you do. Where do you go in the middle of pressure? Do you run away and go try to figure it out on your own before you come to me? Do you use me as the last resort? Do you go ask for advice in all the wrong places? Do you crack? Right? Because that's all part of the human nature. And that's why I believe it's impossible to lead at the extraordinary level that we're called to lead without truly having intimacy with God.
And that's a whole different level of intentionality.
That's a whole different level of intentionality because it doesn't come from your head or your willpower, which is short-lived. It is an endless source, the wellspring of life. That's pretty awesome. Like every single one of us has access to infinite wisdom, infinite creative downloads, ideas, solutions in our business, infinite peace. Like imagine having a well. There's a well over there. You guys can't see it, but there's actually a well. And I'm like, imagine there is a physical well and every day you can just go to it and you could drink from the well and whatever you need, it's like, it's there. I need relief right now. I need wisdom. I need clarity. The thing is that so many people never go to the well. And so when they go, it's like they don't know what they're getting, right? They're praying, but they're not hearing because you haven't trained yourself. You haven't trained your ear to hear the voice of the Spirit. But the well is always there. It's almost like we're blind to it. We'll go like try to pull water from everywhere else, the dirty hose, this and that. Meanwhile, it's like right there. And God's like, I don't know, like when's he going to come to the well,
Okay, last question, but as
All
we
right.
bring this in for landing. So let's just say I feel like I am that person that you're describing, that guy that you're describing who's maybe hiding in some of the wrong places, not going to the well. And maybe the biggest reason I don't is because I feel like I don't deserve it. Right? So I keep avoiding it, right? Who am I to step into that role? What do you say to him?
I say the same thing, is that is a distortion and a lie of the enemy. Who do you think you are? That God created you, and now you're running from the one that created you, right? His whole design for us was to run to him. His whole design for us, he created that void in us on purpose so that he could fill it so that we would be complete. So the idea that I'm empty and then I screw up and and then I run and I want to hide and I want to like be ashamed and I'm not worthy, that's a distortion. That's a religious program. Those are lies. And again, there's so much distortion in the world that we live in today. Again, this could be a whole other podcast episode, but something is 90% true. Is it still true? No, it's a lie. It's a distortion. It's a deception. And we live in a world that has so much twisted truth, in media and education and everywhere. And so much of our identity, the stuff we believe about ourselves, we have some truths because we've made mistakes. We've gone through stuff. We've done dumb things in our marriage, dumb things financially. So there is some truth, but it's not the whole truth. And so when you miss the whole truth, you live from a distorted identity. And this is why come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. The whole idea was, when Adam and Eve were hiding, because they knew they were naked, they're like, we screwed up. Now we're naked. Now we can see our mess even worse. God's like, who told you you were naked? He already knows you screwed up. Like, he already knows. You're not hiding anything, right? The idea that we can hide is a joke. So we are created to run to him because he can already see us. And that's a beautiful thing. And he created us that way so that he would complete us. So I believe like this idea of that I'm not enough and I'm more than enough. Yes, to both. On my own, I'm not enough. I'll never be enough, because I wasn't ever created to operate alone. But when I'm in union with him, and then if I'm in union in marriage with you, it's like multiplication power. It's superpower. It's supernatural. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
You look at the world today, the norm of the world is a lot of loneliness, a lot of isolation, a lot of not enoughness. But that is out of order. That's out of our design.
Yeah.
But our design is to be unified in marriage, unified with God. And I believe unified, if we're talking about teams and people and culture, we've got to get people unified again. But what are we getting unified under, right? Who are the ones that are going to set the vision, that are going to have the boldness and the courage to speak up in a world that is very, confrontational right now, and speak up from a place of love, but be leading, with boldness and integrity.
Beautiful. Okay. Drop the Armor. It's on Amazon. It's on all your major booksellers.
Drop the Armor. Get this book. Read this book. You can watch it or you can listen to it on Audible. Audible is a great one. I read it, so it sounds extra nice. It's very enjoyable to listen to. Listen, this book is on Amazon, Books, Barnes & Noble, all the major things. At the end of every chapter, there are some self-reflection questions. There's tables in here. I like to give you like real life, practical, tactical things, even though a lot of these things that I talk about are big picture. We want to bring it down. We want to make it tactical, practical, so you can apply it to everyday life. So at the end of every chapter, there's questions for self-reflection, action items for you to actually move the needle from. And there's also some bonus resources that you can get with the book, which is the fillable PDF journal for those of you who like to do reflection and writing. Some guided visualizations. I'm a big believer in guided visualization and more. So you guys can check that out. Go to dropthearmorbook.com. www.dropthearmorbook.com, and you can order the book there. You can download the resources.
Cool. Thank you for being on the show. This is a game changer of an episode.
This is a game changer in an episode, and I just want to say this is a physical manifestation of intentional leadership. Because we got together 5 years ago-ish, and yesterday was my birthday, and we were looking back over every year. And we were looking back at photos of my 43rd birthday when we were in Colorado. Y'all, we took a trip in the truck. We had the pop-up tent in the back of the truck. That was early in our relationship. We camped in the middle of the woods, like on an air mattress in the back of the truck. We were cooking food, like no campsite or anything, just, wild and free. And I remember, Mark, you did the piece of wood. So we do this thing at some of our events where we have people write their limiting beliefs on one side, what they want to, accomplish on the other side. And so I wrote down some of those limiting beliefs and what I was really dreaming about. And it was funny because that picture popped up yesterday. And it's amazing. In 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, your life can look radically different. And since that time, man, we have lived like lifetimes. And we keep growing in relationship and business. God is doing more and more amazing work in our life. We have 6 kids. We're in Italy for a month right now. These are not small things. These are things that people dream of. And we're sitting here on the deck of a Tuscan country home, recording this podcast, me with a book that I've written. Like, this happened in less than 5 years.
Yeah.
Come on now.
That's some Kairos time, not some chronological time
That is
stuff.
Kairos time. That is God's glory. That is God in our life. And that is us saying, yes, Lord, help us to lead intentionally every single day.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, guys.